What is up, guys? Under Kieran now. I'm back with another edition of Londrick's Fave Fives, and we're going to be tying in with the big debut this week. On Wednesday night, it's going to be AEW Dynamite on TNT. So, what about the last show that it was on, wrestling show that was on TNT many years ago? That's right, WCW Monday Nitro. So we're going to go with WCW Monday Nitro moments. Now, this is going to be a hard video to make because God, there's just so many moments when I was sat there thinking about, not so much towards the end, but definitely in like the 95 to about 98. So many great moments that I'm gonna have to miss the cut, so I'm gonna have to narrow it down to 5. So here's some honourable mentions: Kevin Nash's WCW return, Alondra Blaze throwing the WWF Women's Championship into the garbage can. Lex Luger showing up on the first Nitro. That's obviously a big omission. The night after Fall Brawl 1996 when Sting started becoming the Crow. So let's get these honourable mentions out of the way and let's get the actual list. Coming at number 5, we're going to the very end of Nitro, the final Nitro, March 26, 2001, and we're going to talk about the last match in the last televised wrestler match on TNT, Ric Flair versus Sting. I mean, I did consider putting the Shane McMahon on Nitro moment on there, and that'd be a great moment. But for me, when I think about the last Nitro, I usually think about this match here. Ric Flair versus Sting, ending out wrestling on the Turner Network after years and years and years. And many people, including me, thought, yeah, this will be the final wrestling match ever on this network. And it was, until this Tuesday night when AEW Dynamite opens up with Cody Rhodes versus Sammy Guevara. So this just felt so right, you know. I mean, for me, I can't think of a better way to close out WCW than these two guys. I mean, when you think WCW World Championship Wrestling, these are the two guys you got to think of. And especially when you think about the roots of WCW, what WCW was before it became WCW, so the NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions. Did anybody mean more to that brand than Ric Flair? For me, no, absolutely not. I mean, and of course, Sting for me, WCW's biggest homegrown star ever. I mean, when in a time where guys were jumping back and forth to the WWF and WCW, Sting's the one guy that remained loyal to WCW from the start to the finish. So when Ted Turner bought the company in late '88, all the way to 2001, Sting was always there. Hell, even Ric Flair made the jump from in 1991. So there you go. Then when you think of celebrated WCW rivalries, you got to think of this one right here. So, well, just so much history in this match. History between the two guys. I mean, this goes all the way back to 1988 and the very first Clash of the Champions on TBS. Right the way through Sting briefly becoming a Horseman, getting kicked out of the Horseman. Sting becoming the World Heavyweight Champion for the first time over Ric Flair in 1990. Then all the rivalry was revisited in the mid-1990s when they had that unification match in 1994. Then they had another little rivalry in 1995. And so at the time, at the end of the company, Ric Flair was on-screen president of WCW after Wink Wink retiring in, I guess, about the summer of 2000, something like that. Can't remember the exact time when it was, but then Ric Flair was off television for a while. Then in about October, November of 2000, Ric Flair came back to become the president of WCW. He did wrestle on the final pay-per-view Greed, so it looked like Ric Flair was probably going to make an in-ring comeback anyway. But the final Nitro, and apparently this was all Vince's idea as well, because that last Nitro, obviously, the WWF bought the company, and I believe the sale happened I believe it was March of 23rd, I believe. So that would have been Friday Yeah, there must have been the Friday, and of course, obviously, before that, it was announced that WCW program was getting cancelled on TBS. So the week before, we knew this was going to be the last Nitro on TNT. Obviously, there was all this stuff up in the air, like what was going to happen when WWE bought the company. Was it's going to come back on another network or whatever? We didn't know that at the time. So this final Nitro in Panama City Beach, Florida, because WCW is doing the spring break thing every year, and it was just kind of a cool little location that they used to do. So Ric Flair comes out on the show, cuts a promo against Vince McMahon, an anti-Vince McMahon promo as well. Then he declared that he's going to make the challenge. His greatest opponent in this company ever was Sting, which I'm not sure if that was really true, but whatever. And so he challenged Sting to have a match one more time here on Nitro tonight. And this was Sting's first match in a while, back in a while as well, because he took some time off towards in the 2000s. They had an angle where Scott Steiner injured him and Sting was off television. And I don't know, who knows, I don't know when Sting was actually going to come back, because I don't know. But he came back for this last Nitro to face Ric Flair one last time. Well, until TNA came along, but at the time, it seemed like this was going to be the final ever Sting versus Ric Flair match. And of course, ultimately the last WCW match ever. So yeah, this, like I said before, this just felt so right. And this is one of the quality of the match doesn't really matter that much. Let's be honest. The match itself was alright. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it definitely wasn't great either. Certainly, when you think of the Sting and Ric Flair matches, if you were talking about pure match quality standpoint, you certainly don't think of this one. I mean, you probably either go for the Clash of the Champions one or the Great American Bash 91. This match is what it was, you know what I mean, at the time. Ric Flair was well into his 50s and then not in his prime anymore. And as a matter of fact, he actually wasn't in the best shape physically either, because this is one of the very few matches. Ric Flair wore a t-shirt in this match because he was so embarrassed by his physique at the time. I mean, this is the time Ric Flair was going through a lot of confidence issues, which, when he's Ric Flair, that's kind of amazing to think about. And I believe, because I think Sting must have had a legitimate injury, and that's why he was off from 2000. So I don't think Sting was 100% either. So the match was alright, but it was all about the moment and all about Ric Flair and Sting battling one last time on Nitro, on TNT, on the Turner Networks. Just so much history came to an end that night. I mean, there was wrestling on the Turner Network since the early 70s, and you know, I'm going through all the WCW Saturday nights and all that, Jim Crockett Promotions, etc. Just a fantastic way to end WCW. And like I say, just a great moment. Coming in at number 4, July 6, 1998, Goldberg defeats Hollywood Hogan to become the WCW champion. Now, this is the one I imagine a lot of people would probably have as a number 1 moment. And if you're one of those people, I'm not going to argue with you and say you're wrong. It's definitely up there. But for me, number 4 is still in the Fave 5, so it's still a good spot to be in, number 4. And this is probably one of maybe the most iconic match to ever take place on the history of the program. One of the biggest world title wins on a probably the biggest world title win on a free television show, I would say. And yeah, the summer of 1998, what a time to be a fan. I mean, arguably the hottest time ever in pro wrestling. I mean, because you had both companies, WWF and WCW, doing extremely well. I'll say this is probably the height of the Monday Night War, with the competitive rivalry between the two companies. Just awesome stuff. Ratings battle was heating up. I mean, because for 2 years, I just stuttered there big time, didn't I? WCW had their own way. I mean, I don't need to explain it again, but WCW won for 83 weeks in a row, which I'm sure you've heard about. Then in April of 1998, WWF won around, and then for the next few months they'd trade victories back and forth. But I think at this point the momentum was switching towards the WWF. I mean, the Attitude Era was on, the WWF had found a successful formula, and they were coming back, they were going after WCW. So, and So at the time, WCW needed something, and the hottest guy they had was Bill Goldberg. Now, it could be debated for the end of time whether putting this on pay-per-view or doing it for Nitro is a right move. I'm not going to discuss that in detail now because, my God, we could have a whole discussion on that one. I mean, people have debated for that for the last 21 years, and they'll probably debate it for the next 21 years as well. So I'll just pretty much explain the background of the situation. So, yeah, Bill Goldberg comes into pro wrestling in 1997, debuts at WCW on September 22nd, 1997, beating Bill DeMott, Hugh Morris in like a 2-minute squash match or whatever it was. Because at the time it was Goldberg versus Hugh Morris, nobody knew who this guy was, so they were like, Hugh Morris will win this match in a minute, who gives a shit? But no, it was actually Goldberg going over really, really strong. I mean, he kicked out Hugh Morris's finish, no laughing matter, then hit a few big moves and beat him. And it's like, that was pretty impressive. The guy Goldberg's just a great example of something just happening. I mean, the Goldberg phenomenon just happened. It wasn't planned that way. It was just kind of something that just caught fire and they ran with it. I mean, Goldberg was not a great wrestler or anything like that, but Goldberg had a presence, I mean, an aura about him. There was just something about him that draws you to him. And I dare say he still has that aura. I mean, always had a little bit of a soft spot for Goldberg. Kind of even enjoyed him coming back to face Dolph Ziggler at SummerSlam this year. I mean, when Bill Goldberg comes on the screen, I think you're just immediately drawn to him. It's just a guy you want to watch, to be honest with you. So Goldberg really wasn't a good wrestler, but Goldberg was explosive, Goldberg was intense, so what WCW did was just have Goldberg win a load of matches in short squash matches, and that's what he did. Started winning all these matches, and at the time WCW had such a deep roster as well that there was a hell of a lot of veterans to be able to work with Goldberg, to teach Goldberg and make him a little bit better. So as 1997 goes along, Goldberg starts winning, and then they talk about the streak. So after just a certain amount of matches, I don't know how many it was, fans and commentators started talking about the streak. So this guy's now 35-0, 40-0, 50-0, etc. So every time he'd win a match, he'd get another match on the streak, and people were talking about, well, he hasn't lost yet. He's been through all these people, and he just got over. He just got over with the fans. I mean, the fans really took to him, and WCW just ran with it. I mean, at the time when WCW had a ton of stars in the roster, they had Hogan, they had Flair, they had Nash and Hall, they had Bret Hart, they had the Giant, they had Lex Luger, they had Sting, they had Randy Savage. Goldberg was the guy that everyone was talking about. Then 1998 rolls around, the momentum just gets even better. And in April, Goldberg defeats Raven to become the United States Champion. That was a really entertaining match. That definitely deserved to be an honourable mention on the list. As soon as Goldberg wins the United States title, it just gets even hotter and hotter. I mean, the Goldberg chants and all that. Everyone loved Goldberg, you know. So obviously, time goes by. Now we're into the summer. WCW needs something, and they decide they're going to capitalise on this Goldberg phenomenon. It was actually Hogan who came up with the idea to Eric Bischoff. You know what, brother, I know what you think we should do. You should put me and Goldberg in the Georgia Dome, and Goldberg should go over and win the title. Now, I don't know what Hogan's motivations were. Was Hogan thinking, well, if I put Goldberg over here, will I be the one to end the streak later down the line? I don't know. But then, so Eric Bischoff took that. Then there was a Nitro coming up in the Georgia Dome in July. So what was he going to do? Originally, they were thinking, let's just put Goldberg and Hogan on as a dark match after Nitro and have Goldberg go over in a non-title match. But then they decided, you know what? Let's just fucking go for this. Let's do Goldberg Hogan for the title. Let's put the title on Goldberg. Let him go over. Let's just see what happens. Now, like I say, at the end of the day, Should Goldberg and Hogan have been saved for a big pay-per-view? I would say yes, but this is not the time of day to debate about that. As I said before, it's been debated for 21 years now. Don't need to go through that again. So the Thunder before this show, JJ Dillon made the announcement on Thunder Television this Monday on Nitro in the Georgia Dome. Hollywood Hogan's going to defend the World Heavyweight title against who he thinks is the #1 contender, and that is Goldberg. And that announcement, Jesus Christ, in a wrestling war at the time, I think most people were going to watch WCW that night. I mean, it was one of those ones where you have to watch this match now. I believe at the time the match was announced, the Georgia Dome wasn't sold out yet, but when this match is announced, all those extra tickets sold. So on this summer night, this was going to be what was going to go down here. I mean, was Goldberg going to go over and become the world champion, or was Hogan going to be the one to end the streak? To make it a little bit more intriguing, at the start of the show, a match was made where Goldberg was going to get his title shot, all right, if he beat Scott Hall earlier in the night. So the streak may have ended before we even got to the Hogan match. But Goldberg went through Scott Hall earlier in that night. And then we got the match, Goldberg versus Hogan on Nitro. Now, if you're only bothered about work rate, technical wrestling matches and all that, this match won't be for you. I mean, as an actual match, it's average at best, really. But for the entertainment value, just for the sheer magnitude of the moment and all that, the crowd reaction and all that, this match was... this is a big match. This just felt like a big match, you know. I mean, the crowd was absolutely insane for this one. I mean, this was in the Georgia Dome, where Goldberg played football all those years ago, and now he's coming back, the hottest star in WCW. I would say if it wasn't for Steve Austin being at his peak at the time, Goldberg would have been the hottest star in the business. But being behind Austin's no real shame. I mean, because at the time Austin was arguably the hottest star ever. But Goldberg was definitely up there as well. As far as WCW, definitely the man. So this match was, I thought the match was good. It wasn't a great wrestler match or anything like that, but it was never going to be. It was Hollywood Hogan in 1998. There was Goldberg, who at no time in his career was ever a great wrestler, really. But as far as telling the story and all that and getting the crowd emotionally invested, it absolutely did its job. I mean, and then I think the NWO were going to come out to interfere, but Diamond Dallas Page and Karl Malone put a stop to that. They had Malone hit the diamond cutter on, I think it was Kurt Hennig, and then Hogan turns around, eats a spear from Goldberg, then takes a jackhammer, and then all out however months it was, so 10 months into his WCW career, Goldberg is the World Heavyweight Champion, undefeated. And then there it is, that image of him on the ropes holding up the United States and the World Heavyweight title. I think just such an iconic picture right there. And like I say, when you think of world title changes, you're all on free television, you have to think Goldberg beating Hogan that night in the Georgia Dome. Great moment, and obviously one of the greatest moments of Goldberg's career, one of the biggest moments of WCW's career. In many ways, maybe the peak of WCW, to be honest with you. I mean, this was one of the last really great moments in the history of the company, to be honest. But yeah, if you haven't seen this match, I would definitely check it out. Coming in number 3, the Bret Hart Goldberg steel plate incident. Now we're going back to the dying days of WCW for this one. So I think this took place in, I think it was March of 1999. So when the company was going down the shitter, let's be honest, it was. But for me, this was an awesome moment. And then when you think of Bret Hart and WCW, you really struggle to pick out some positive moments. I mean, there's some, but they're very few and far between. I think you think of his debut match against Ric Flair, sold out in 1998. The Owen Hart tribute match with Chris Benoit in 1999. And then Bret becoming the WCW champion for the first time in Toronto of Mayhem in 1999. The Who You to Doubt El Dandy promo. God, I love that promo. But then there's this one right here, March 1999. This show took place in Canada, in Toronto. I believe I could be wrong, but I believe it was WCW's first ever televised event in Canada, which is kind of amazing to think about when the company was around for so long and they took this long to do a big show in Canada, a Nitro. Just amazing, but I think one of the goals of bringing Bret into WCW was definitely to raise WCW's profile in Canada, may it cause Bret Hart a massive Canadian star. But obviously at this point, Bret had been in the company for about a year and 3 months, so about 15 months, and let's be honest, I'm not going to go into it again, we've talked about their death, but Bret and WCW just so... What could have been, let's be honest, what could have been? So much potential there to be awesome, but it wasn't. And then Bret came up with this great idea, because WCW was coming back to Canada, to do this thing with Bill Goldberg, which I'll explain in a minute. So, he wanted to do this big angle with Bill Goldberg, and then come back to work with Bill Goldberg over the summer and put him over. Because at the time, Bret Hart had a groin injury, and this is going to be writing Bret off television for a couple of months. Like I said, Bret was going to come back to work with Goldberg later on, but circumstances prevented that, which I'll talk about in a minute. So Bret had this great idea, and it was one of those ones where, according to Bret, he had to really sell Eric Bischoff and Kevin Nash on this. So this was an idea that he presented to Goldberg. Goldberg said he loved it, and then went to Eric Bischoff. Then Bischoff kind of ummed and ahed about getting it on television, but then eventually Bret got Bischoff to agree with it. So Bret came out, because Bret in Canada, you're not going to get Bret Hart booed in Canada. The Canadian fans always loved Bret Hart, so Bret Hart got a huge pop, and then he wore he had a Toronto's Maple, I think it was the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm no good with North American sports team, but it was whatever the Toronto hockey team was, he had that shirt on, so cheap pop, yeah, but it worked, let's be honest, it was a cheap pop, I'm not going to deny that. Then Bret starts talking shit about Goldberg. Goldberg comes out, because even though at this time the streak had been lost, and then but I think Goldberg was still WCW's most popular superstar, and I think he was that at the end of the company. Now, obviously at the time, this is after losing the streak to Kevin Nash, the finger poke of doom, yada yada yada. We've talked about that before. So maybe Goldberg wasn't quite as hot as he was in 1998, but he was still pretty damn over. But of course, we're going into Canada now, where Canada is definitely Bret Hart's country. So there's because of Goldberg got booed when he came out, because of course he was. He was going against Bret. I mean, not that people hated Goldberg, it's just the Canadian fans love Bret Hart so much. So Goldberg and Bret gets into it. Goldberg hit the spear on Bret Hart, and then nothing. What happened here? Goldberg seems to be knocked out. What happened here? Did Goldberg get overexcited, hit the spear too hard that he knocked himself out? So Bret was down for a bit, but Goldberg wasn't moving. And then after, 10, 15 seconds maybe, Bret Hart gets to his feet. Bret Hart takes his shirt off, and it's revealed that Bret Hart underneath his shirt had a steel plate on. So what an incredible setup that was by Bret. Yeah, totally set up Goldberg, hook, line and sinker. He definitely suckered him in. Goldberg comes into the ring, spears Bret, but of course Bret had the steel plate on, so Goldberg actually spears the steel plate and knocks himself out, and then Bret turns Goldberg over, does a fake 3 count, just an awesome angle, and then Bret gets on the microphone and declares to Eric Bischoff that he quits WCW. Bret leaves the ring, and this was supposed to lead to Bret coming back around the early summer feud with Goldberg and probably put him over, I believe. Though I believe Bret was probably going to put Goldberg over, but then of course 2 months after this is when Owen Hart died, and they dragged it over there to 1999. So Brett coming back to WCW was delayed quite a bit because Brett needed to be home grieving for his brother and all that sort of stuff. And never came back to September. And they never really went back to Brett and Goldberg until Starrcade later that year. And of course, you know how that turned out. So I love this moment. I think it's one of the best moments in the history of WCW Nitro. I would say this, along with the Benoit tribute match, not the Benoit, the Owen Hart tribute match with Benoit, was Brett's two greatest WCW moments. So, yeah. Coming in number 2, and this could be a lot of people's number 1 as well, really, and that's May 27th, 1996. Scott Hall comes back to WCW. I briefly considered making this 2 into 1, with tying Kevin Nash's debut into this as well, because the two moments really mean so much to each other, but I thought, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to focus on this one. I think Kevin Nash's return was great, but this is the one that started, this is the moment that started everything for WCW. The Outsiders, the NWO, WCW dominating the ratings, all that good stuff started at this moment right here. Scott Hall coming back to WCW. So, to set the scene, really, it's one of those, probably one of the biggest moments ever in wrestling, really. So, at the time, WCW, of course, launched Monday Night Raw that previous September. Debuted with an absolute bang, with Lex Luger showing up Nitro, shocking everybody, really. I mean, even the people inside the WWF who thought he still worked for them, but no, he's working without a contract, went to WCW. Then, of course, obviously the war heats up, all that stuff with Medusa throwing the WWF Women's title in the trash can. WCW giving away results of Monday Night Raw on television. Then WWF retaliating with the Billionaire Ted skits and all that stuff. I mean, it was definitely a pissing battle, and at the time, WWF's top. I would say 1996 comes around. More momentum's definitely going on WCW side, but the ratings are still back and forth. Like WCW might win for a week, WWF might win for a week, WCW might win for a couple of weeks. WWF might have a 2 or 3 week winning streak. So there was no real clear leader at this point. It was all back and forth, but at the time, WCW definitely had the bigger stars. I mean, at the time they had Ric Flair, they had Hulk Hogan, they had Sting, they had the Macho Man, they had Lex Luger. Then you think who the top WWF stars at the time? You'd probably go Bret Hart, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Diesel, Razor Ramon. Now 1996 rolls around. The contracts of 2 of these stars are coming up, and that's Diesel and Razor Ramon. Now, this is where great timing comes into wrestling, because at the time, I guess it was just the way that they both came to the company around the same month. Both guys' contracts were coming up almost at identical times. I believe there was like a week, maybe 2 weeks maximum at the most between the two contracts. So at that time, a WWF contract, it was basically a 1 year rolling contract. So you'd be contracted for a full year, and then your contract would roll over for the next year if you wanted it to, or if the company wanted it to. But there was a window on that contract, and I believe it was either 60 or 90 days. I'm not sure. I believe it's 90. It was 90, but I could be wrong. In that 90-day period, where if you give your notice within that 90-day period that you do not want your contract to roll over. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you're leaving, but it gives you a window of opportunity to explore other options. And sometimes guys would do it to improve the situation. They would do it so they could negotiate better terms with the WWF, because my understanding is if your contract rolls over, you basically paid in the terms of your old contract, if that makes sense. So both Kevin Nash and Scott Hall's contracts were coming up at the time, and they were both, because at the time the WWF wasn't doing well at the time. I believe both guys weren't making as much money as he wanted to. Especially Scott Hall's has been the most vocal about this. I mean, I think in 1995 he made less money than in 93 and 1994. And at the time, because WWF weren't doing guaranteed contracts either, they were doing incentive-based contracts. So I believe Kevin Nash said what he was guaranteed was 10 days a month at $150 a pop. So, but the money, the way it would work, you'd get your bonuses based on how well your house shows did, your position on the card, how many TV tapings you did, like the success of those. Pay-per-view buy rates was definitely one, so you'd get like sort of the pay-per-view. So basically, if the pay-per-view did well and you were on top as a champion, you're going to get a great payday. If the event didn't do well, you wouldn't get paid as much. And obviously there was stuff like factoring like merchandise royalties and stuff like that. So it was one of those ones. If you were a top guy, you could make a decent amount of money. But if you weren't making much at all. But what was attractive about the WCW contracts is they were fixed contracts. So for example, you could sign for WCW for $350,000 a year. That is what you would get no matter what, irrespective of how good or bad the company's doing. That would be your salary for the year. So I feel that was attractive for a lot of guys because there was a bit of financial security there when you know what you were getting, so you could accordingly plan your life and all that sort of thing. And I think the schedule as well at the time, the WWF was doing 250 to 300 days a year, but at WCW there was less house shows in WCW, so guys were maybe working 150 days a year, so that's appealing as well. So basically, both Nash and Hall had talked to WCW in early 1996, and don't need to go into too much details about how all that came down, but ultimately the decision was made. Nash and Hall got better deals in WCW. I mean, let's just be honest, that's how it went down. I mean, I think both Nash and Hall wanted to stay with the WWF, but they were also businessmen, really. At the end of the day, wrestling is a business. I mean, as much as us fans I think wrestlers should stay in a lot of the companies, the husbands, the fathers, they've got responsibilities. I think anyone would have done what Kevin Nash and Scott Hall did. I mean, Kevin Nash specifically asked Vince to match the offer. Vince said he couldn't do that because Vince's reasoning was because at the time, obviously, Ted Turner had a lot more resources than Vince. Vince wasn't doing well at the time, but he thought if you give Nash this deal, then when contract negotiations, Brett was going to ask for that, Taker was going to ask for that, Shawn was going to ask for that, etc. And it would have created a big problem for him. So Vince unfortunately could not match the WCW deal, so Nash and Hall left the company. I mean, they had to really. They had to do what was best for them and their families, and that's just how it went down. And of course, like I say, timing-wise, the guys' contracts ran out of about a week or two of each other. So Nash and Hall coming to WCW by themselves would have been cool. However, I think the fact that they got both of them and two of the WWF's biggest stars as well at the time coming into WCW was just so massive for the company. I think it's definitely the biggest promotional jump ships in history. Those two guys going over. And I think with the time as well, they were younger than most of WCW's main events as well. Although, to be fair, Nash and Hall weren't exactly young guys themselves, but when you look at the likes of Savage and Flair and all that, there's something about Nash and Hall seems much more younger and hip about them. Now, Scott Hall's contract came up first, so Scott Hall was going to debut first on Nitro. And I believe this was like 8 days after the curtain call in Madison Square Garden as well. So Scott Hall literally just left the WWF a week ago, and now he's coming into WCW. So if you're in the middle of a Monday Night War, right, with and you get one of your company's biggest stars, the natural thing to do would be, well, we're going to promote the shit out of this, right? We're going to have vignettes on Scott Hall. We're going to do weeks and weeks of videos of, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash are coming. They are even shouting from the rooftops, make a big announcement, these guys are coming to WCW. We didn't get any of that. No announcement, no vignettes, nothing. And it was one of the most brilliant things he could have done. So this is going to start the big outsiders angle. So how did Scott Hall debut in WCW, you ask? Well, there was a match going on at the time between Steve Doll and Mike Enos. I mean, two more forgettable wrestlers you couldn't think of. They were having a match on Nitro. It was what it was. And then Scott Hall comes out from the crowd. Now, you might think, they'll be like, the commentators like, oh my god, that's Razor Ramon coming down to the ring. But no, the commentators, I believe, Larry Zbyszko and Tony Schiavone, and they kind of like acted though they didn't know what was happening. So the WCW is such a brilliant way. The Scott Hall would come out of the crowds in such a mundane match that they did it in such a way that, hang on, this isn't supposed to happen, is it? So they did it in a way where it looked like it wasn't supposed to happen. I mean, I remember Tony Schiavone was like going, whoa, whoa, whoa. But Larry Zbyszko acting like he didn't notice what was going on. He was trying to commentate the match as normal. He was like, what the hell? Then the commentators went silent. The guys left the ring. Scott Hall got the microphone. So they did a really great job of making this look like it was unplanned. Like this Scott Hall was legitimately walking out on Nitro and this wasn't supposed to happen. So because WCW hadn't announced it, and this was before, but there was internet in 1996, yeah, but certainly not like it is now. I mean, not many people had the internet at the time. I mean, I think you only really knew that Kevin Nash and Scott Hall had left the WWF if you're on the internet or you're subscribed to the Wrestling Observer at the time, but I would say at least 90% of the audience didn't really know what was going on. I certainly didn't know what was going on at the time. I was 9 years old when this happened, so I certainly had no idea that Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were leaving the company to go to WCW. So to the general fan base, like, Razor Ramon just invaded Nitro. So Razor Scott Hall gets a microphone, and it was a very basic promo as well. I mean, the promo wasn't very long, maybe 2 or 3 minutes later, and he said, I don't know, he said pretty much, you people, you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. Where is Billionaire Ted? Where is the Huckster? Where is the Nacho Man? That punk couldn't even get in the building. Me, I go wherever I want, whenever I want. Then I think he said a little bit more. I think he even mocked the fans going, WCW. And he said something like, Bischoff, you Ken doll look-alike. Then he talked about how Bischoff was like talking shit about the WWF and all that. He goes, you want a war? You got a war. And then just walked off. Didn't have to say much. Didn't have to scream. Didn't have to holler. None of that. Didn't even have to declare himself as Razor Ramon. The implication was right there. Razor Ramon had just walked out on Nitro and declared war on WCW. So it looked like there was a WWF invading WCW now. And of course, it was either the following week or 2 weeks later. I can't remember which one it was. I don't know. Maybe it was 2. I can't remember. But anyway, after that, Kevin Nash debuted in the company, and then the rest, as I say, is history. But that initial debut, it was genius how WCW did it. Like I say, no vignettes to promote it, no announcement, no nothing. Just have Scott Hall walk out on Nitro, interrupt the match, and cut a promo. And it's one of those, at this moment, just felt so real and definitely captured the vision of what Eric Bischoff wanted WCW Nitro to be. I mean, just such an iconic return to the company. It really was. I mean, if you haven't seen this moment, it's not very long. It's like 5 minutes maximum. So it's one of those ones as a wrestling fan, you simply have to check it out. It's really that big of a moment. Coming at number 1, for me, my personal favourite moment in the history of Monday Nitro. One of the greatest moments of all time in pro wrestling. And that is September 1998, the night after Fall Brawl. Ric Flair returns to WCW in Greensboro, South Carolina and reforms the Four Horsemen. Talk about emotional. This is easily one of the most emotional returns of all time. Just an absolutely iconic moment. So, obviously, 1998, Ric Flair's an absolute icon in the business. I mean, he'd been around forever. Did so much for the business. Is such a big star. Obviously, the 1998 thing with Ric Flair and Eric Bischoff is one of the most, probably one of the most juicy backstage stories of all time in pro wrestling. It really was one of the biggest things. Then for Ric Flair to return to the company and in Greensboro as well in North Carolina was just so right. So we're kind of starting this video with a Ric Flair moment, and we're ending the video with a Ric Flair moment. So to set the scene, it's 1998. WCW was on top and all that. Bischoff was king, really. I mean, Bischoff had, for all his faults, anything to say about Eric Bischoff, he took the company that was distant second to WWF for all those years, losing money every time it was in business, to several years later becoming the number one and making record money at the time. I mean, it's just amazing WCW from 1995 to 1998, just how much the company had grown and how much the company had improved in that time. And for all his faults, Eric Bischoff was the man on top at the time. Bischoff was the guy who had take Vince McMahon down a peg for a little while. One star he had a major falling out with, though, was Ric Flair. So at the time, so this is basically what happened. So at the time, Ric Flair had his son Reed, who was doing amateur wrestling. I think he was about 10 years old at the time. Because he was in all these amateur wrestling groups and all that. He was in like national tournaments and all that. He was really good. So Ric Flair's going to have his son at the national tournament. But at the time, Ric Flair, and I believe Ric Flair when he says this, Ric Flair had cleared up the company, asked for time off to do this thing with his son, because this was going to be a Friday he was going to go. He's going to go for the Friday, for Friday and Saturday. So he'd asked for like the shows off to go to see his son in the national championships at the time. And this was all approved. And I believe Ric Flair, because this is what I believe happened. I believe because WCW was such an unorganised mess that whoever Ric Flair cleared the time hadn't cleared it with Eric Bischoff, and so I think it was just a massive mix-up, and I dare say, because Bischoff had so much on his plate at the time, he probably had about 100 things to do that day, that he'd agreed to let Ric Flair have time off, and it probably just slipped his mind, because like I say, Bischoff running a big company like WCW at a time when WWF was starting to fire back, Bischoff probably just forgot about it and let it slip his mind. So Ric Flair thought it was all approved. He's going to do Nitro, go home, then on the Thursday fly his son out. I can't remember where it was, but it was somewhere else in America to do the tournament and then come back the following week. But however, the company asked Ric Flair to appear on Thunder at the time. Obviously, at the time, Thunder was a second show on TBS on a live on a Thursday night. But Ric Flair was like trying to explain a situation. Douche was like saying, no, you have to go. And then Flair was like, no, I'm not going. I've already done time off. Then they tried to offer a compromise by giving him a private jet. But then he was thinking, but Flair to pay half of the fare. But Flair was like, do you really think I'm going to bring my son to Thunder and then fly back at 2 o'clock in the morning so he could do the amateur wrestling the next day? No. So Ric Flair stuck to his guns. He wasn't coming to Thunder. He prayed he asked this time off. He was going to take his time off. Then when word got back, Bischoff was absolutely livid over this. I don't know if this was just catching Bischoff on a bad day, because by all accounts Bischoff could either be a cool guy, or if you caught him on the wrong day he'd be a complete piece of shit. So I guess, and like I said, I honestly think Bischoff probably just forgot that he approved for this time off and all that. So Bischoff went absolutely fucking nuts with Ric Flair, suspended Ric Flair from WCW. They got into a big pissing match. Now Ric Flair claims that the company complained to him that him not appearing on Thunder cost the company about $2 million, and Ric Flair thought, well, that's an interesting number, seeing as you only paid me $500,000 a year. So obviously Bischoff and Flair sued each other over this. There was a big lawsuit going on. Bischoff was going to plan to sue Ric Flair for apparently failing to turn up for work. In Bischoff's mind, Ric Flair thought he was do whatever he wanted because he was Ric Flair, so Bischoff was going to knock him down a peg or two. And there was even an incident backstage where, in front of all these employees, Eric Bischoff, head of the company, mind you, declared that he was going to break Ric Flair, he was going to break his family and all that. So basically, neither side was backing down. There was a big lawsuit between the two, so at least temporarily, Ric Flair was out of WCW. I believe he's still under contract, but with the lawsuit, he wasn't working there. And yeah, so it's just ironic, really, at the time where Stone Cold and Mr. McMahon were having this awesome rivalry on television. In the real world, in WCW, Ric Flair and Eric Bischoff having their own employee versus employee battle. It really was one of the most famous lawsuits in wrestling history. It dragged its heels for months and months and months. Now decided it was going to back down. You know, it was just an unfortunate situation, really. And obviously at the time, there was even speculation that Ric Flair was going to jump to the WWF in 1998, and I believe that option was definitely explored. I mean, there was Unforgiven 1998, sorry, which is in Greensboro, and they were considering doing an angle right there where Ric Flair was in the front row of his son, and they were going to do a thing where Jim Ross is going, we've got a record, Reed won those, I believe Reed won that national championship. We're going to talk to a great wrestling champion here who's right here from North Carolina. And they're going to interview Reed Flair, but Ric Flair's going to be sat beside him. So they were honestly considering having Ric Flair on camera at Unforgiven 1998, but I believe legally they couldn't do that. So, and even if you watch that Unforgiven show, from time to time you'll hear a smattering of We Want Flair chants, and then obviously in WCW as well, you'd hear that various times over the coming months. Then it finally got settled. The lawsuit got settled because Ric Flair missed the wrestling business. He missed being in wrestling. He wanted to go back to WCW, go back to work. So finally, things are somewhat resolved, and Ric Flair is going to come back to WCW. And that, again, timing in wrestling can't be much better. The time that Ric Flair is going to come back, WCW had a big Nitro in Greensboro. In Greensboro, North Carolina and South Carolina in general, that was Ric Flair country. I mean, Ric Flair was over in Carolina as much as anyone ever in the business. So Jerry Lawler in Memphis, CM Punk in Chicago, Stone Cold Steve Austin in Texas. Ric Flair in Carolina was pretty much God. I mean, even at the height of the NWO, when WCW did shows in Carolina, Ric Flair was always the most over guy on that show. So, and they did a thing. So the night after Fall Brawl, Ric Flair's going to come back to the company. And I guess Flair and Bischoff had resolved the issues enough that they were at least going to agree to work with each other, because this was then going to lead to Flair and Bischoff feud, and taking the real life feud essentially and just making it into a wrestling angle. They're going to have a big match at Starrcade 1998. So September 1998, they were going to do a thing with Arn Anderson reform the Four Horsemen, because of course when Ric Flair was gone, the Horsemen were essentially dead, because you can't have a Four Horsemen without Ric Flair. It's just not possible. Without Ric Flair, there is no Four Horsemen. I mean, it'd be like Nirvana if Nirvana had continued without Kurt Cobain after Kurt Cobain died in 1994. If Nirvana had continued, it just wouldn't have worked without Kurt Cobain, would it? And it was kind of like that. And I guess if WWE went with a new Shield or something now, it just wouldn't work. So in the ring was a new Four Horsemen: Arn Anderson, Chris Benoit as a manager, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Mongo McMichael, and Arn Anderson's going to this big promo about the reformation of the Four Horsemen. And obviously, throughout the show, fans were chanting, "We want Flair, we want Flair." I mean, the Greensboro fans were ready to lose their shit the moment Ric Flair came out. So Arn Anderson, he goes through about a 5-minute promo or something like that. Then what I thought was an absolutely awesome moment, so he goes, "And there you have it." They're like, "Oh, shit, what a goof, what a goof." I've been accused of being racked in the head a few times, having a little touch of Alzheimer's. Oh my god, I almost forgot about the Fourth Horseman. Ric Flair coming out here. So that was a perfect setup, and my god, when Flair's music hit and Ric Flair came out, that pop, that was a goosebump pop right there. An absolute goosebump pop. One of the most awesome pops in the history of pro wrestling. Because like I say, this was 1998. A lot of these Greensboro fans grew up with Ric Flair, because the Greensboro goes all the way back to Jim Crockett Promotions, where Ric Flair was the undisputed biggest star. All the early Starrcades of Harley Race and all that. the original Four Horsemen feud of Dusty Rhodes, being the NWA champion for all those years, all that amazing stuff, and wow. One of the most emotional returns of all time. I mean, you can see the emotion in Ric Flair's face when he came out. This was a big fucking deal. Though then Ric Flair comes out, starts cutting a little promo about things, ragging on Eric Bischoff and all that, and he's saying, could it be that the very group that Eric Bischoff said was dead is alive and well? There's going to be a party in Greensboro tonight. And then another, what looked like, but they made it look like an unscripted moment. Eric Bischoff came out to look like he was trying to legitimately end the segment, saying, that's it, cut, we're done here. Then Ric Flair, he let all these emotions come out. Now, I would say 90% of what Ric Flair was saying was true. He just looked at Eric Bischoff, cut an awesome promo. He's in character, but he just remembered all the shit that Bischoff had done to him. Cut a scathing promo, talking about how he hated Eric Bischoff's guts. He was in abuse of power. He hated him. He hated him so bad. Because Ric Flair said if he got into it, if Bischoff said, let's go, Ric Flair would have gone over and just beat the shit out of him. Because he was in Ric Flair mode, he was in character, but the emotions was all there. Just awesome, scathing promo on Eric Bischoff. I think he'd go, fire me! I'm already fired! Fire me! Just awesome. It was one of those ones that just, that moment just felt so great. It just felt so real. And I think that's what's great about wrestling, when something can feel real, you know. It was just one of those great moments. For me, my most favourite moment in the history of Monday Nitro. And that's a wrap, guys, for another edition of Lundrick's Fave 5. Not sure when the next Fave 5 is going to be, or even what it's going to be. I'm undecided at the moment. Maybe got a couple of ideas in my head, but nothing concrete. I was thinking in November I might do a Fave 5 Starcade matches. What I'll definitely will do, probably in December, probably do a Fave 5 Wrestle Kingdom matches. But apart from that, guys, I'm open to suggestions. And that's a wrap, guys. And until next time, peace.